It's good to be back and not traveling. And we're going to continue in Exodus. And as we remember, I guess 2 weeks ago, we left off with the Ten Commandments. And the way I kind of look at the way God laid this out, it was he gave the outline, and then he gave the thesis, so he gave the laws in a concentrated form, and then he gave the details later. Because just like lawyers do, and I'm not casting aspersion on them, they look at something, and then they start giving scenarios. So, well, it means this, but what if this happens? So I think God anticipated that, because if you look at the Ten Commandments, to me, if you both look at the word and the intent, that's basically all you need. Even Jesus said that to the rich young ruler, because the one thing that he missed when he asked, what else do I need to do? He wasn't looking at the intent. God wanted, in his Ten Commandments, he wanted mankind to be able to live together and live a fruitful life so they could go through life. Yes?
That's funny. I think about that all the time. Somebody says, well, you lied about that. Well, just a little. But I don't recall seeing in Ten Commandments, where the subtitle be, thou shalt not lie unless it's a little old white line.
Yeah.
There's no and it's all the much to it. It's just plain black and white.
Well, that's true, but what are we really good at doing in general? Pointing out other people's faults?
Manufacturing.
Yeah, I know, those people, man.
Modifying for our own benefit.
Yeah. What's that?
Modifying for our own benefit.
Modified, justifying.
Yeah.
We're so good at justifying. Well, I did this, so this wouldn't happen. So that's our problem. Is the old adage about give an inch, take a mile. We invented that. And if you go back and think about it, how did man get along, so to speak, without rules and laws? Before this, they lived every day, had to, get through life every day, and they did it without rules and laws. So how did they kind of go through without, think about what the Ten Commandments are. It's a moral code to live by. If you don't have a moral code to live by, then what do you have? Chaos is one thing, but there is one thing before that the way God invented us, which was what? He mentioned something when he made us.
He made us the image of God, which would indicate that we would have a high moral standard.
So God made us in his own image. So we are spiritual beings in physical bodies. And there's something there within us. Now, that comes from God. Now, whether we follow that, and embrace that, is kind of the problem sometimes.
We have an inherent ability to know the difference between right and wrong.
So that inherent ability to know right and wrong, somehow that's in us, somehow.
And when he did something, at the end of the day, he said, it's good.
Yeah.
You did a good thing.
Yeah. So somehow we somehow survived up till then, up till now, without this moral law or code to go by. But what God wanted to do in introducing these moral laws and codes and regulations to the Jewish nation is He wanted them to look different. He wanted them to be set apart from society because all of the nations of the earth up to this point, they had certain things, decrees and things of that nature, but to have this moral code, it hadn't been seen to this degree of what God is fixing to introduce. And He puts them in to me, in order of importance. So, we know what was the first couple of things that God said when it comes to the laws.
Thou shalt have no other gods before me.
No gods before me, and it is something that He wanted to make sure that the first relationship, the first thing that you think about in the way that you act and live, you need to be right before me. Then you can be right before others. So the first thing He wanted them to do is to make sure that you understand who your God is. Because if you don't get that right, you can't get the other right. So we first have to have an understanding that I am your God and I know what's best for you. Then after that, if you believe that and follow that, then I'm going to tell you how you can live amongst others around you and live by this moral code that will be the best for you to be able to live among the earth, and especially to represent me. Because if I know best for you, I'm going to tell you to live this way. And if you live this way, others around the world will see these people are different. These people believe in God, follow God, and there's something different about them. Because the one thing that we see all through history, especially the Old Testament, when they were following God and not rebelling against Him, what happened to them? Good things happened. They saw something different that happened. They won their battles. Their livestock flourished. Their people flourished. They grew in number. Look at what happened with the Egyptians. Ever since Joseph came about, they had decades and decades of witnessing God's favor on the Israelites. They were different. They were blessed. And they saw, man, we can't get our animals to reproduce in this kind of fashion. How in the world are they doing it? Look at their people. They reproduce in such an incredible number. There's something different about these people. And when they proclaim to have this one God, then we kind of have to look at that, because there's kind of a precedent being set. You know, our gods, you know, we have to go and, you know, give these sacrifices and such, and sometimes it gets answered, sometimes it doesn't. So there's something different happening here. So God introduces this moral code, and this moral code, I think, will be seen by other nations and will be adopted in some cases later on because they say it works for them. I wonder if that will work for us. So, yeah, even today, we see how moral code and law is introduced into our law, don't we? You know, even our forefathers, whenever our constitutions and such were written, even named God in those laws to help us with our moral code in the way we conduct ourselves. So we start out, and the Lord said to Moses, thus you shall say to the people of Israel, you have seen for yourself that I have talked with you from heaven. You shall not make gods of silver to me, nor shall you make for yourself gods of gold. So one of the first things to remember here is he said, you have seen for yourself, I have talked with you from heaven. You remember how we just talked about the cloud being over the mountain and the thunder and lightning and the rumblings that absolutely terrified the people. They were so terrified, and they said, Moses, you go talk to him. We're staying away from this. You know, and God forewarned them, don't come near this mountain. You come near this mountain, you die. And so they saw and witnessed something that was so unbelievable and awesome that they knew that's God. That's God. And we know that there's something different here. And, you know, unfortunately, what the part of it that they didn't embrace and really hear was God saying, I'm your God. I'm going to take care of you. Out of all the nations of the earth, I'm your king. And I'm going to take care of you. And nobody can mess with you. Because remember what you just saw? The most powerful nation of the world, by far. I defeated them single-handedly. You didn't have to raise a finger. Marched them out. I destroyed their army. I disgraced them. I humiliated them. And I decimated them. And you walked away with their riches and everything that you needed. And I did that so that all could see there's a difference between gods and God Almighty. So the one thing that God wanted to make sure they didn't do is revert back to creating their own gods. Because remember where they just came from. That was the life there. Everything was about a God that fixed something. And it was ingrained in them. Remember, generations came up watching them worship these gods and pay homage to them so they can get something from them. And they looked at it as a pay for play. You know, you want good crops, you got to give to the God of this. You know, if you want good health, you got to give to the God of this. You know, and probably one of their standard questions is if they were having problems with something, well, did you give your sacrifice? So now there's something completely different. And what God wants them to remember is, even though I have given you the most incredible, convincing evidence that there is only one God under the heavens and earth, you're still going to forget. You're going to still go back to the old idiotic things that you invented. You want to keep making yourself God rather than recognizing me as God. And when I say that, when I say making yourself God, who created these gods in the first place? They did. So if you're the one who invents your God, really, what are you doing? You're making yourself God because you invented this. You invented this God, and now you're giving stuff to it. So if you really look at it, you're actually making yourself God because you think you're smarter than the God Almighty. So he said, don't do that. I've given you all the evidence that you need that there is only one true God, and that one true God is going to take care of you, protect you, and provide for you. He's already given them those evidences. Every day they see this pillar of fire leading them. Every day they go out and gather their manna. Every day, for some reason, they're not attacked because they're going into foreign lands, remember. They're not attacked by they're protected. How does that happen? It's because of what God is fulfilling his promise that he gave so many generations before, that I'm going to do all this stuff for you. I'm going to take you to this wonderful place to live. And God keeps reiterating it time and time again that if you will do what for me? I'm just asking you to do one thing. Be obedient. You know, I'll tell you what to do. All you got to do is listen to me. Do what I say, you know. Kind of like what we do with our kids, you know. Just do what I say. I don't want to have to sit there and explain it 10 times, and we do anyway. But God is trying to save them from who? Themselves. That's what God does today. He tries to save us from ourselves because we are the ones that get in our own way all too often. And with this statement right here, it's the greatest example. Because who is it that he is saying is making the gods? You are. You're making these gods. I didn't do it. You know, if you think those gods are greater than me, then, you know, let's part ways. But quit doing it. It's an insult to me. If I'm going to protect you and provide for you and take care of you, you can't disrespect me. So let's get that out of the way first. You know, to love your Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. An altar of earth you shall make for me and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I cause my name to be remembered, I will come to you and bless you. If you make me an altar of stone, you shall not build it on hewn stones, for if you wield your tool on it, you profane it. And you shall not go up by steps to my altar, that your nakedness be exposed on it. So he does provide something that I think that's more of a human need than God needs it, which is they want to thank God in some way by they're familiar with the sacrifice system, with the gods. So he provides that outlet for them to be able to praise him. And so God apparently thinks that's something that it's fine. It's good that you want to praise me. So he provides that outlet for them and a way for them to do it. But we see this one regulation about don't touch the stones that you make out of the altar. What's wrong with that? What's the problem with chipping away at a stone just to make it better?
Made the stones themselves.
Okay.
It's a similar thing to making something out of gold or silver. It's just a different product, still man-made, even though they use earthly products, just like gold.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What else? What else? Why would you think he doesn't want them to touch these stones with a tool?
Said you profane it.
You profane it, yes.
Altering his creation.
So, and altering his creation, yeah. So, one of the things you have to think about it, if you had to build an altar for sacrifice, and somebody decided, yeah, we should, make this pretty because this is for God. So we need to make this pretty. Every time they would go to that altar, what would they see?
Pretty stuff.
Man, look at that pretty. Bob over here did that, and Frank over here did this, and so when they looked at this altar, they would look at it as an amalgam of these men had made all these pretty things. And he did not want any credit to go to this altar to anyone. And on top of that, what is a problem that man has when it comes to worship? They keep wanting to internalize it. They want to make it about themselves. I mean, look at what we have today when it comes to all the different religions out there. Everybody keeps wanting to change it to fit them, their beliefs or likings. God had one way of belief, and he wanted them to stick with it. If you start making all these pretty little things, then it stops becoming or starts fulfilling something that is not spiritual in nature. It's selfish in nature. So I think because we see what God's opinion is if you take a tool to that stone. It actually profanes it. It's turning it into an idol, basically. So, in order to prevent that, if you build an altar, you just pick with what was there. What my creation has created for you is it has to be left alone. And because I don't want you going up to that altar patting yourself on the back about your pretty altar that you made. I want you to go up to make sacrifices because you recognize who your God is. And if you go up and you're looking at all this pretty stuff that we made for God, you're thinking about not God. So, yes.
And I think we can apply that to our own sacrifices we do for God. Yeah, look what I just did. Look what a good person I am. I
Yeah.
don't see somebody else doing that kind of a sacrifice.
Yeah, I think the one thing that in our sacrifices to God, the one thing he never wanted it to be is a competition. You know, he gives or she gives, you know, something better than I do. You know, we see what it turned into when Jesus gave the example about the people coming through and dropping their money into the treasury as they entered the temple. And we see the example of, you know, people, you know, hearing all the big coins drop in there and such, and this widow, you know, comes in with this meager substance. And it was a difference that Jesus wanted to make sure, you know, this is a sacrifice. Her sacrifice was better than all of theirs. Why?
She gave all she had.
She gave everything. She gave everything that she had, and the others gave out of their richness. You know, they were certainly giving away a whole lot more than she did, but they certainly didn't give the quantity so far as of their wealth. So it was something that Jesus recognizes, the gift and the sacrifice. It was a true sacrifice out of the heart. And that's what God is trying to prevent here, is this becoming a competition that feeds your selfish desires. Because God recognizes our selfish desires in every single law that he makes. And he says, I'm trying to prevent you from, you know, becoming a people that only think about yourself. I want you to think about others. I want you to think about God. I want you to be able to live in a way that you will recognize it's not all about you.
If you cling to anything that's ungodly, even though you no longer partake of it, it's a constant reminder.
Yeah.
It pulls you further away from God, and that's what God was telling us.
Mm.
This is, turn the page, this is done.
Yeah.
It's not part of your life, and it should
Right.
never be part of your life as long as I'm king.
Yeah.
And so that's the whole point, and not touching it, not looking at it,
All right.
and that's, as we said earlier, that's for us to look at too as well. We don't want to keep a reminder of anything that pulls us away from the Lord.
Right. Well, and just remember, you know, who they are and where they came from. They were a slave nation, and God was not a big part of their lives. They knew of it, and they knew their history, but he was not a part of their lives like what's the way it's fixing to happen. But now he's rescued them out of that situation. And it was a deal that, just remember, this is hundreds of thousands of people that have left and escaped, and they've arrived to this point, you know, in a short few months, they've gone from a complete slave nation to a complete free nation, and they have a new king, a new mighty king that, and there are going to be some that embrace this, and there are going to be some that cannot get out of that old way of life. It's going to cause a terrible ripple effect later on. But some just cannot get out of being in that terrible situation that they were in. They want to almost perpetuate that and stay in that. You know, God's already proven, listen, you don't have to worry anymore. I'm taking care of you. And I'm giving you evidences every single day. You know, that was why it was such an important thing that I think God did when he invented this, or whatever, the manna system. You know, being able to go out, you have to gather your food every day. If you try to hoard any, it goes bad. You know, and on top of that, you know, that seventh day of rest where they didn't have to go gather, you know, I'm providing for you. And if you don't go gather the extra, you're not going to have anything. You're going to be on a diet that day. So it was something that he's trying to train them out of their old way of thinking, because their old way of thinking was not good. It was they had that slave mentality, that old way. They think there isn't another way. You know, have y'all ever had that situation where I don't care what it is, that you keep doing something the same way each and every time, and you never think there's a better way, and then all of a sudden you see somebody doing something differently and thought, I cannot believe I've been doing it this way all this time, and I could have been doing it this way. That's what God is trying to get them to do. Have that moment. Have that aha moment where you say, why have I been doing this? Why have I been rebelling? Because I could not see the forest for the trees in the way. And so God is trying to get them to have that aha moment on their own, but it's going to be a struggle. Some are going to embrace it and some are not. Now, these are the rules that you shall set before them. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, and in the seventh he shall go out free or nothing. If he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. So, why do you think God is dealing with this slave issue thing in his own people? You know, they just came from a slave nation, and what are we seeing here?
Well, in any community, there are people who
There's debts.
cannot survive financially on their own. And so
Okay.
they will sell themselves, in this case, sell themselves into slavery, knowing that within a few years they can get out of it.
Mhm.
They would get whatever they needed before they done what they thought.
Okay.
Sometimes it's to pay off a debt.
Pay off a debt. So that's where we come with the bond servant term. It's working off a debt for a period of time and such. But you would think, okay, God's the one who saved us from all that stuff. Why would we continue to perpetuate that within our own people?
Well, there's millions of them.
There is a lot of them. So,
They're all not on the same social status.
you know, and so to me, this is one of the things that God is relegating to. This is just in them. They just think they can't live without it. And, you know, we're dealing with a very poor society at this point, even though they've been given a lot of riches from the Egyptians, but God is just relegating, they're going to do this. Because we'll see later on, in fact, even in the time of Jesus, this is still going on. It's just not going away. It's something that man, just for whatever reason, wants to continue to perpetuate. Let's see what Paul says about it in 1 Corinthians. Were you a bondservant when called? Do not be concerned about it, but if you can gain your freedom, avail yourself the opportunity. For he who called in the Lord as a bondservant is a freedman of the Lord. Likewise, who was free